If you ever work a night shift, always remember one thing. Cameras don't always show everything. Sometimes, they show things that a human shouldn't see. My name is Daniel Harper. I was a security guard at an old shopping mall in Cedar Falls, Iowa, USA. The mall was almost closed. Half the stores were empty, the lights were half off, and the entire mall looked like an empty graveyard after dark. But that was all normal to me, at least until that night. That night was my first night shift. It was about 1:40 a.m. I was sitting in the security room watching the monitors. A total of 16 cameras were showing different parts of the mall. Parking lot, hallway, escalators, food court. Everything was perfectly normal. Silent. Empty. Then suddenly, camera 7 blinked. I looked at the screen. The camera showed the back hallway of the mall, where most of the stores were closed. And there, someone was standing. A man. Tall. Very tall. He was standing in the middle of the hallway, and he was looking straight at the camera. It was strange, because the mall closed at 11, and there was no one inside at night. I picked up the radio and said to the other guard, "Mike, is anyone inside the mall?" A few seconds later the answer came, "No. I'm in the parking lot right now. There's no one inside." I looked back at camera 7. The man was still standing there. But one thing was strange. He was smiling. A very wide smile. But there was no emotion in his eyes. Like someone was trying to be human. I announced over the intercom, "Sir, the mall is closed. Please get out." There was no response. The man didn't even move. He just kept looking at the camera and smiling. Then suddenly, he took a step forward, closer to the camera. His smile grew even bigger. A strange fear ran through my body. I said to Mike on the radio, "Mike, can you come in? There's a man on camera 7. There was silence for a few moments. Then Mike spoke. "Daniel, I'm in the hallway right now." I immediately looked at camera 7. The man was still there. He was smiling. Then Mike spoke softly on the radio. "Daniel, this hallway is empty." The radio almost fell from my hand. I looked at the monitor again. The man on camera 7 was now standing very close to the camera. His face was filling the screen, and his eyes were looking right into the camera, as if he were looking at me. Then he slowly tilted his head, and his lips moved, but there was no sound in the mall. I zoomed in on the camera and tried to read his lips. He was saying, "I can see you." My breath caught, because at that moment, the door to the security room behind me slowly opened. Crack. I slowly turned around, and what I saw, it changed my life, because the same man with camera 7 was standing behind me, and still, he had the same smile on his face. That thing wasn't human. I stood there completely still for a few seconds. My mind couldn't quite process what had just happened. Moments ago, that man had been standing in the hallway at camera 7, and now, he was standing behind me inside the security room. I slowly turned my neck. My heart was beating so fast, I thought I could hear the sound outside. And then, I saw him. The man was really standing behind me. Tall. Unnaturally tall. His head was almost touching the frame above the door. But the scariest thing was his face. He was still smiling. But now that smile looked even stranger than before. As if his mouth had opened beyond human reach. And his eyes. He wasn't blinking at all. Not even for a second. I mustered up the courage to say, "Sir, the mall is closed. You shouldn't be here." My own voice sounded strange as I said this. The man didn't even move. He just kept looking at me. And then, he slowly tilted his head to one side, like an animal looking at something new. Then his lips moved. And this time, I also heard a voice. A strange, broken voice. "Daniel." My blood froze. I had never told him my name. At that moment, Mike's voice came from the radio. "Daniel? What's going on?" I immediately grabbed the radio and said, "Mike, come to the security room now." A few seconds later, Mike spoke. "I'm coming. 2 minutes." I looked at the man again. He was still staring at me. Then suddenly, he took a step forward. My heart jumped into my throat. I backed away until my back was against the wall. At that moment, something strange happened on the monitors. All the cameras suddenly started flickering. Static appeared on the screens. Then one by one, the same man appeared on all the cameras. Camera 1, he was standing in the parking lot. Camera 3, he was standing by the escalator. Camera 5, he was standing in the food court. Camera 7, he was standing in the hallway. But they were all smiling at the same time, as if there were dozens of him in the mall. My breath caught. I looked back at the man standing in front of me. He was still there. And now, his smile was slowly growing wider, as if his face was about to explode. Then he said softly, "So many cameras, so many eyes, but none of them can save you." At that moment, I heard footsteps running down the hallway. Mike was coming. I breathed a sigh of relief. But the next moment, the man suddenly disappeared, as if he had never been there. The door opened and Mike came in. "Daniel, what's going on?" I pointed to the monitors, trembling. "That man." Mike looked at the screens. All the cameras were now completely normal. There was no one. Mike looked at me strangely. "Have you had anything to drink?" I was about to say something when camera 7 blinked again. We both looked at the screen. And then Mike's face went pale, because the man was standing in the hallway again. But this time, he wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at the ground, as if he was smelling something. Then he slowly raised his head and looked straight into the camera. His eyes were completely black, and his smile no longer looked human. Then he slowly raised his hand and pointed at the camera, as if he was looking at us. Then his lips moved. We both tried to read his lips. He was saying, "Now I see both of you." At that moment, all the lights in the mall went off. The entire building was plunged into complete darkness. And from the hallway, slowly footsteps began to sound. Thump, thump. He was coming towards us. Mike whispered, "Daniel." He's off camera. When the darkness came alive, all the lights in the mall had been turned off. Inside the security room, there was only the faint blue light of the monitors. The rest of the mall was completely plunged into darkness, and the sound of footsteps coming from the hallway was slowly approaching. Knock, knock, knock. Mike and I were both looking at each other. His face also had the same fear that was rising inside me like a storm. Mike said softly, "Daniel, we have to get out of here." I immediately shook my head. But as soon as we moved towards the door, the monitors started flickering again. All the screens blinked together. Then suddenly, the same man started appearing on all the cameras again. But this time there was something even stranger. He was moving in every camera. In camera 1, he was walking in the parking lot. In camera 3, he was coming down the escalator. In camera 5, he was walking around the food court. And in camera 7, he was standing in the middle of the hallway. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him in the darkness, there were some other shadows. Human-shaped shadows. Long, crooked. And they were all smiling the same way. Mike whispered in fear, What is this?" I couldn't answer, because at that moment, the sound of footsteps outside the security room stopped. There was silence. A few seconds that felt like minutes. Then, from outside the door, I heard someone's nails gently scraping against the door. Krrrr. My body trembled. Then a voice came. That same broken voice. "Daniel." Mike immediately grabbed my arm. That thing on the other side of the door was calling my name. Then the voice came again. This time a little louder. "Daniel, open the door. We just want to see you." Mike whispered, "We have to run. Now." There was an emergency exit behind the security room. We slowly started moving towards it. But as we approached the door, something else suddenly appeared on the monitors. All the cameras started zooming in at once. And on every screen, the same smiling man was visible. But this time his face was different from before. His skin was stretching, and his smile was so big that his cheeks were about to burst. Then he slowly raised his head and looked straight into the camera. Then he whispered, "You looked at us. Now we can come through." At that moment, All the monitors turned off at once. The security room was plunged into complete darkness. A few seconds later, we heard the door handle slowly moving. Click. Mike whispered, "How can this lock be opened?" I couldn't answer, because the next moment, the door slowly opened. Crack. Something was standing in the dark hallway, very tall, and its eyes were glowing faintly in the darkness. Mike immediately turned on the flashlight. The light spread into the hallway, and what we both saw, it made our blood run cold, because there wasn't one, but 6 smiling men standing there, and they all looked exactly the same. One of them slowly bowed his head. Then he said, "You watched us. Now you belong to the cameras." Then they all started walking together towards us. "Knock, knock, knock," Mike shouted. "Run." We both ran towards the emergency exit. But as soon as I opened the door, my heart stopped, because outside in the parking lot, dozens of smiling men were standing, and they were all watching us. Those people had come out of the cameras. The scene I saw as soon as the parking lot door opened, it shook my soul. In the entire parking lot, dozens of smiling men were standing, all the same, all tall, the same unnatural smile on everyone's face, and everyone's eyes were looking straight at us. Mike suddenly stopped. "Daniel, this is not possible." I also closed the door gently, because going out was like suicide. We slowly started to back away. In the darkness of the hallway, those 6 smiling men were still standing, and now they were slowly moving towards us. Knock, knock. The sound of their footsteps echoed throughout the mall. Mike said nervously, "We have to hide somewhere." We both ran inside the mall. The darkness was so deep that we could only see the light of Mike's flashlight. When we reached the food court, we hid behind a closed shop. My breathing was rapid. Mike turned off the flashlight. Now the entire mall was completely silent. Then we heard them walking. Knock, knock, knock. Their footsteps were slowly approaching. Then a voice came. The same broken voice. "They are hiding." Another voice came. They watched the cameras. Then several voices started speaking at once. "Now they belong to us." Mike whispered close to my ear, "Daniel, these things are not human." I nodded. I was now convinced of the same thing. At that moment, camera 12 above the food court suddenly turned on. Its small red light was shining in the darkness. Mike said softly, "Camera is still working." I looked up, and then I realized something. These things were coming through the cameras. Suddenly, camera 12's screen blinked on a large monitor in the mall. We both looked over. On that screen, we were both visible. Our hiding place, behind the food court. Mike's face went pale. "Daniel, they're watching us live." At that moment, all the cameras in different parts of the mall turned on at once. One by one. Camera 3, Camera 5, Camera 9, Camera 12. The red lights of all of them started to glow in the darkness, like hundreds of eyes staring at us. Then the same smiling man appeared on the monitors again. But this time, he was very close to the screen. His face was filling the entire screen. And his smile, now it was almost impossibly big. Then he whispered softly, "You shouldn't have looked at us. Now we can see you everywhere." At that moment, in the darkness of the food court, we heard footsteps. Knock, knock, knock. They were coming towards us. Mike grabbed my arm. "Daniel, what if we break the camera?" I immediately looked up. This was probably our last chance. Mike picked up a nearby metal chair and threw it at camera 12 with all his strength. Crack! The camera broke. The red light went off. And at that moment, a terrifying scream echoed in the darkness of the mall. A scream that could not have been from a human. The smiling man standing in the darkness suddenly stopped. Then a voice came, full of anger. "They broke the eye." Then several voices shouted at once, "Find them." Suddenly, they all started running. The sound of their footsteps echoed throughout the mall. "Knock, knock, knock, knock," Mike shouted. "Run." We both ran back towards the dark hallway of the mall. But I was getting a terrible feeling. because if they were really coming from the cameras, then maybe we had just opened more doors for them. The thing behind the cameras. We were both running at full speed in the dark hallway. The sound of footsteps echoed everywhere inside the mall. But these were not ordinary footsteps. It was very fast. Too much. Like dozens of things were chasing us at once. Knock, 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 knock. Mike gasped. Daniel, they're coming after us. I looked back, and what I saw, it shook my soul. In the dark hallway, at least 15 smiling men were running. But the way they were running was strange. Their bodies were leaning forward. Their arms were hanging unnaturally. And their smiles were still exactly the same. Mike lifted the shutter of a store. Over here. We both immediately rushed inside. It was an old electronics store. Inside, there were broken TVs, monitors, and wires lying everywhere. Mike immediately pulled down the shutter. Wham! We both sat down on the floor panting. The sound of running footsteps passed outside. Then silence. Mike said softly, "Maybe they couldn't see us." I was about to say something when an old TV inside the store suddenly turned on. There was white static on the screen. SHHHHHHHHH. I slowly stood up. Mike also started looking at the TV in a panic. Then the static slowly started to disappear, and an image appeared on the screen. This was the mall's security room, and in it, we were both standing. Mike said in surprise, "How is this possible? We were both in an electronics store. Then who was standing in the security room?" At that moment, the two people standing on the screen slowly turned towards us. And then we realized it wasn't us. They were both smiling men, but they were wearing our faces. Faces that looked exactly like ours. Mike backed away in fear. "Daniel, they're copying us." Then the things on the TV slowly came closer to the camera, and their lips moved. He said, "We learn your faces, so we can replace you." At that moment, the rest of the TVs inside the store also turned on at the same time. 1, 2, 5, 10. The same smiling man was visible on each screen, and behind him, hundreds of shadows stood. Then he said slowly, "The cameras were our doors. And you opened them." Mike shouted and broke a TV. Crack. The screen broke, but the same scene continued on the other TVs. Then the man came very close to the screen. His eyes were now completely black, and his smile now almost reached his ears. Then he whispered, "We don't need the cameras anymore." At that moment, a voice came from the dark corner behind the store. "Stop." Mike immediately turned the flashlight in that direction. In the light, a smiling man stood, but the door was closed. How did he get in? Then behind him, another shadow appeared. Then another. Then another. In a few seconds, 10 smiling men stood in the darkness of the store, and they all slowly started moving towards us. Mike whispered, "Daniel, it's not coming from the cameras. It's coming from the walls." Then they all spoke together, in one voice. Now there is no escape. When reality began to break, we were no longer alone inside the electronics store. 10 smiling men stood in the darkness, the same unnatural smile on their faces. Their eyes were completely black, and their heads slowly tilted to one side, as if they were watching us intently. Mike whispered close to my ear, "Daniel, what if they reach us?" I couldn't answer, because I felt like we both wouldn't be alive for much longer. Those things slowly started moving towards us. Knock, knock, knock. The sound of their footsteps echoed off the walls of the store. Mike suddenly picked up a metal rod. "If we have to die, we'll die fighting." At that moment, all the TVs in the store started screaming at once. A bright white light spread across the screen, and then a strange scene appeared. The mall was not showing on the TVs. Rather, a very old security footage was playing of the Blackridge Mall. But this footage looked very old, probably several years old. In this video, the mall looked brand new. The lights, the people, the shops. Then the date appeared on the screen. October 17th, 2003. Mike said in surprise. This was the year the mall opened. Then some people appeared in the security room in the video. Scientists. In front of them were large monitors. And on these monitors, the same smiling men were visible. A scientist turned to the camera. He said, "Experiment 7 successful." My heart stopped beating. Experiment 7? Then the scientist said, "We have contacted them from another dimension. They can see us. But as long as the cameras are active, they can't come out." Mike said slowly, "Daniel, so we broke the cameras. I finished. Set them free." At that moment, the smiling men standing in the store stopped. Then one of them stepped forward. He was taller than the rest, and his smile was even bigger than the rest. He said slowly, "You understand now. Your world was only a window, and the cameras were the glass." Then he slowly raised his hand, and his fingers began to grow unnaturally long. As if bones were melting, Mike hit the metal rod with full force. Damn. But the rod passed through his body. As if he were a shadow, Mike backed away in fear. This isn't solid." Then the tall, smiling man came closer to us, so close that I could feel his breath. But the smell coming from his mouth was like rotting meat. Then he whispered, "We don't need bodies. We only need faces." At that moment, our images appeared on the store's TVs. Daniel, Mike, both of our faces. Then he spoke, "When the sun rises, we will wear them." Mike shouted, "Daniel, we have to shut off the mall's main power." I understood immediately. If the entire system shuts down, then maybe these things will go away too. But before we could run, that tall, smiling man suddenly appeared right in front of me. His face was only a few inches away from mine, and his smile had now gone beyond human limits. Then he said softly, "Too late." At that moment, Mike, standing behind the store, suddenly shouted, "Daniel." I turned around, and my heart almost stopped, because a smiling man standing behind Mike was slowly touching Mike's face. And where his fingers were touching, Mike's skin was melting. When reality completely shattered, Mike's screams echoed throughout the store. I turned around, and the scene that came before me shook my soul. The tall, smiling man who had touched Mike's face was now slowly changing his face. The skin was melting, the eyes were bulging outward, and the smile, it wasn't just his lips, but his entire face was transformed into a savage grin. Mike tried to back away in panic, but as soon as he stepped back, the smiling man also took a step forward. And with each step, Mike's screams began to sound less human, but echoing and distorted. I immediately pulled up a metal shelf and created a barrier between me and Mike. But it didn't make any difference. The things were dripping from the walls, hanging from the ceiling, lurking around us from all sides. Then all those smiling men spoke together in one voice. "Faces, we need your faces." I immediately understood that they weren't just here to kill us. They were here to copy us and steal our identities. I mustered up the courage to say to Mike, "We have to get to the main power room. If the entire mall shuts down, they might all be gone." Mike shook his head in fear, but we both started running towards the store's back exit. As we ran through the mall's hallways, footsteps could be heard from every angle. Thump, thump, thump. It was much faster than a normal human's pace, and with each step we felt like they were predicting our movements. As we approached the power room, I saw that all the security cameras were following our faces. A shadow was glinting in the red light of each camera, and those shadows were just smiling, each one's smile reflecting our fear. Mike immediately grabbed the handle of the main breaker. I put my hand on his arm. We both pushed the handle down with all our strength. KRRRKKK. The lights in the mall went out. All the electronics shut down, and their voices suddenly fell silent. There was silence, a silence in which you could even hear your own breathing. We both breathed slowly, but I knew this wasn't complete. At that moment, a shadow slowly dropped down from the ceiling of the main power room, and there, a tall, smiling man was suspended in the air as if free from gravity, and his smile was now allowing us to see him for the last time. I looked at Mike. His eyes were wide with fear, and he whispered, "Daniel, this is just the beginning." At that moment, a shivering breeze rushed around us, and I felt more shadows waking up inside the mall. The final reality and the complete terror. The lights inside the mall had turned off. All the electronics were silent. Both of us, Mike and I, were hiding in the corner of the main power room. The same shivering breeze was felt in the air. Complete silence everywhere. But I knew this silence was just a premonition of danger. Suddenly, small shadows began to appear from all corners of the hallway. They were not small. Each shadow had a smiling face, but their bodies were actually changing like fluid. I looked at Mike. His eyes were wide, and he whispered, "Daniel, they're watching us." From every direction. At that moment, the monitors in the main power room came back on. But this was not a normal feed. This footage was showing moments of our own lives. Me leaving the house, Mike drinking coffee. Even the little movements of the two that we had forgotten were all there on the screen. And in every footage, the smiling man was standing right behind us. On one screen, a man, tall, smiling, was slowly extending his hand in front of us. He whispered, "We know you, we own you." Mike shouted, "Daniel, we have to get out of here." I immediately ran towards the main door. But as soon as I reached the door, a white shadow stood in our way. And his smile was the scariest smile I had ever seen. He said, "Your faces belong to us now." I looked at Mike. He had disappeared. Only my presence remained. I turned back into the hallway, and all over the mall, every camera, every TV, every mirror, they were standing there, smiling, looking at me. I ran, but there was no exit. Every door, every path had changed only in their eyes. Finally, I hid in a small storage room. I covered my head with my hands and held my breath. But I knew that he was always watching me through camera number 7. The TV suddenly blinked, and that voice came, not solid, but a sickly whisper. "You watched us, now you belong to the cameras." I never saw daylight again, because ever since I accidentally unlocked the frequency of camera 7, I am now always trapped in a world of smiling men.